too.
Happy New Year, 2021. Is it happy? Is it a new year? This is the first new year where really it's like the same year. You can have new resolutions, the whole deal, but it's like the same year. And The Bachelor 24 and Pilot Pete explain everything. I'll get to that and why Mayor of NYC Bill de Blasio just doesn't get it. And why do you trust the people in power? It's Rob Nelson Live on New Year's Day. It's New Year's Day 2021. I'm live streaming from beautiful Mar Vista, California, where the entire state is locked down. Crafty's with me, producer Crafty, in his studio in Lakewood in California, where the entire city is shut down. What a crazy, crazy New Year. There he is, Crafty Spaceman. Hello, Crafty. It might just be Crafty and I today. Nobody might be watching. Just doing a show for ourselves, guys. No, but, we want to put it on record. First show of the year on New Year's Day. We're going to get to Pilot Pete and The Bachelor. And even if you're not a Bachelor fan or a reality TV show fan, even if you're just like a hardcore Politico, this is going to be good and make sense for y'all. But first, New Year's Eve. What a trippy kind of New Year's it was, right? I mean, in big parts of the country, like if you were in California, like everything was closed. So there really wasn't much of a New Year's, even if you wanted there to be. I mean, you could go to a friend's house. You could go to like your friend's house, but that's about it. Like you couldn't even go somewhere because there's nowhere you could go. I mean, you can get takeout and carry out if they were still staying open late, but you still have to get it and go. You can't even eat it outside and it's kind of cold. So you're not going to like sit on the park bench. So you were having zero New Year's in terms of celebration. And if you were living in places like Florida, say, or Texas or Tennessee, things are more open, you could actually go out and have a little something. Happy New Year, Monkey Arms. Good to see you. We got one viewer with us. Thanks, Monkey Arms. By the way, we're not streaming on Reddit today. So we get a lot of viewers on Reddit. We couldn't hook the Reddit up. Long story, nothing to do with you guys. We'll be back on Reddit per normal on our next show. But so the thing is, right, if you were in places like that, like I have a friend in Tampa, he's in Orlando, was in Tampa, they went out, like there were like a lot of people out, doing stuff. They had nightclubs open and all that. No, don't get into the politics of whether they should or shouldn't. We'll talk about COVID later. Just an interesting thing. I mean, think about this. It took 113 years for this to happen. 113 years for New York City, Times Square, the ball drop to not happen with a live audience. The first drop was 113 years ago. And tons of people went to Times Square. And more recently, you get 1 million people a year in Times Square for the ball drop. 1 million people every year. Nothing canceled the New Year's Eve ball drop in Times Square, and nothing canceled the crowds coming to see it. I'll be honest, when I lived in New York, I wanted to get out of the city. I was like, I don't want to be here for this. I'm not a big crowd person, In a weird way, COVID's kind of doesn't bother me in that way. I like interaction. I just don't need masses of people on my head. So when I lived in Manhattan, I'd be like, I'm out of town. I'm going somewhere else. I'm going to go skiing in Aspen or, go out west, chill out for the new year. But people come from all over the world to be in New York, in New York, in Times Square for that ball drop. 113 years. For the draw. Hey, Ross Ramin, Happy New Year to you too, my friend. Nice to see you. Been a minute. My buddy in Wisconsin up there. We'll talk about Wisconsin. I love Wisconsin, my home territory. Okay, so think about it though. Nothing canceled it. Not 2 world wars didn't cancel it. The Spanish flu didn't cancel it. By the way, how come you can say the Spanish flu, but you can't say the China virus? Why is one more racist than the other? Why is one more offensive than the other? I'm serious. It's only because Trump said it. That's all it is. If Obama was president or Biden was president, called it the Chinese flu or the China virus, people would be fine. we still call it the Spanish flu because it came from Spain. It's not about anti-Spanish people. Anyway, it took all these things, depressions, disaster, crisis. I mean, an entire century plus, and the ball dropped and people came. For the first time, if you looked at those pictures, I mean, yeah, they did the ball drop, okay? They did it. Ryan Seacrest, they were there. You know, they had the bad something was off in all those performances, right? People just couldn't get it together, right? It was like out of sync. But it was all televised, like all the events have been. So yeah, technically it happened because if you weren't there, you could still watch it like you did from other parts of the country or even the world in the past. But it's a significant difference. There was no one there. That's how powerful COVID is. Whether it should be that powerful or not, that's how powerful it is. It has canceled everything. Again, there's a lot of you out there who are like, it shouldn't be canceling everything. And there's a lot of you out there who are like, it should. But make no mistake, it has canceled everything. When you have nobody in Times Square on New Year's Eve, I mean, a handful of crew and that kind of thing, and the mayor, we'll get to that. You have really, I mean, that's the power of COVID. COVID canceled Times Square New Year's Eve, 1 million people, not there. That says something. I mean, you want to look at, sometimes you reduce to the most basic to make the most sense out of things. That says a lot. We've shut down everything. I mean, right? We saw football, sports come to a stop, then sort of restart. Schools, I mean, kids went to school always. Kids not in class, doing remote learning, finding ways to compromise it. Restaurants, bars, stores closing everywhere. Things being shut down, people being told to stay home. But New Year's Eve, Times Square, nobody there. That's like massive. It's symbolic, it's sad, and it's significant. It's significant because it says so much about the state of where we're at in this country. Really does. Hey, Eli. I don't think it's more offensive. It's the time. We didn't have the sensitivity way of thinking regarding racism and ways to refer to things. Oh, we're back to the Spanish flu. Yeah, I think that's true. But I would agree that we didn't have the sensitivity, and it is the time. And partly I'm making fun of the fact that we say Spanish flu and don't say China virus. But my point is, it is the sensitivity. And Trump, I'm not defending Trump. Trump said it pejoratively. Like, let's be honest. He said the China virus. Like, he said it like as a put down to Asia. I don't know that it's really racist in his head as much as it's like he hates China. And so he's going to go after him, you know? Like, it'd have been the French flu. I think he would have been like, you know, the French flu, you know, something like that. But he did it in a pejorative way, no question. But that said, we have gotten so sensitive that we can't say, you know, if the flu came from, the COVID came from China. That's not made up. It's a real thing. And by the way, CNN, MSNBC, all those guys called it the China virus. Don Lemon, there's a clip of Don Lemon calling it the China virus and the Wuhan virus until Trump started doing it. And then they were all like, that's horrible. And that's my point. It was okay to say until Trump said it, then it wasn't okay to say. Trump didn't do any favors by making it pejorative and triggering that in people's heads. But we get a little crazy with it. And just calling things out as they are. I'm not even making a judgment. I'm just saying, let's call it out as they are. Well, yeah, no. I mean, so you're getting detailed there, Cruzen, but good to see you on New Year's Day. You know, I think let's go back to this comment here. You know, it was the military installation in Kansas before it was reported in Spain, right? So it really wasn't originating in China, right? In Spain, I mean, right? But either way, we still call it the Spanish flu. Like, we don't call it the Kansas flu. And my point, again, you guys, my point is merely how sensitive we are about what we say and how we say it. We're also on like the edge of saying something the wrong way, of tripping the wrong wire. We're all so like in our heads politically correct about it. And yet, to be honest, everybody still got their own biases and their own stuff. I'm not saying most people dislike or like people from China one way or the other. There's always been a certain like prejudice often toward Asian countries. But, you know, interesting note, you know, I lived in China right after college, and The Chinese had and the Japanese both had a huge bias about white Americans. It was this weird other than us thing, right? And both cultures had a strong sense of racial identity, especially the Japanese, right? The Japanese had such a strong sense of racial identity that they looked at the Koreans and the Chinese as inferior people. The irony was, if you're American, people would mix Chinese people up with Korean people, with Japanese people all the time, and you'd get called a racist. But I'm not lying to you. I was standing in China one day with this guy. I had two guys on either side of me. One guy was skinny, tall, and bald. The other guy was about my height and literally like almost 300 pounds, like obese, and me. And the girl, this Chinese girl, looked at the two of us, looked at the three of us. She looked at the guy, the tall, skinny, bald guy, and me, and was like, I can't tell the difference between you two. In Chinese. She's like, I can't tell the difference. And I'm like, what? She's like, you look the same. I'm like, how do we look the same? Like, he's tall, bald, skinny. I'm not fat, but I'm stocky, short, and had a lot of hair. But we look the same to her, because this is what how she saw it. To Asian people, she could tell the difference between a Chinese person, a Japanese person, and a Korean person in a heartbeat, attenuated to the features. And then the irony was, she looked at the really obese guy, and she was like, I can't tell what he is. We just started laughing. We felt bad for him, but because she wasn't used to seeing anybody that big. He was like a monster in size to her. So point is merely, everybody sees things from the window, the lens of what they're used to seeing. And sometimes it's prejudicial intentionally, and sometimes it's sort of built in our heads and how we're trained to see things, and it's unconscious and not malicious at all. Sometimes it's just how we see things, and we make no variance for that. We're so uptight about it, So I will say, we see color. Everybody sees color. We pretend we don't, which is offensive on the face of it right there, because there's nothing wrong with seeing color. There's nothing wrong with seeing I'm a white guy. There's nothing wrong with seeing someone's a black woman. Like, obviously you notice that. It's what you do with that identification. You see that and then pejoratively say something about it. Seeing that somebody's black and noticing that, and even seeing that right away, is not a bad thing. Everyone I know who's black acknowledges that black is the first thing people see in them. And even among people of color, color is identified. Are you light or darker? Are you Asian? Are you, Latino? Are you black? Nothing wrong with seeing color. It's whether you then pejoratively attach a label to it. Because you're that color, it must mean blank. That's where the racism and the prejudice comes in, not the actual noticing of color. But hey, either way, Times Square got shut down. Let's just stick to the facts. That says a lot. We shut it down. So many things this year didn't happen. I mean, the Rose Bowl happened not in California. Oh, backing up for monkey arms. The line between unconscious bias and an epithet. It's a great question. Look, think about unconscious bias, monkey arms. Think about this for a second, right? We have all kinds of unconscious bias, and you know your own unconscious bias, okay? If you're anybody out there, be honest. Do you ever walk down the street, and when you see a tall black guy, do you cringe? Do you hesitate? Do you look to your right? If you're a woman, do you clutch your purse a little tighter? If you're a guy, do you tense up? I'm not saying you're a bad person if you do that, and you're certainly not like some Trumper because you do that. I know tons of liberals who admit to doing that. Every tall black guy I know acknowledges that they see it happen. They see it in people's faces. It's a joke with this one guy I used to coach. He was big. He was the nicest guy in the world. But he was a big guy, and he'd be like, man, people do it all the time to me. I see them lean, I see them move, I see them get wary. I'm with people and they say it. They're like, eh. I'm like, what are you scared of? What about that person? So there's some bias in their head that I might get hurt by a big black guy pops up. And it's not even conscious in the sense that you don't like black people. And I'm not saying it's okay, I'll be honest, I don't do it. I don't. Never have. I also, I think part of it can be where you're from. As a teenager, I lived in a very white kind of rural area. But as a kid, I grew up in a very integrated equivalent of an inner city like neighborhood. It's pretty posh now, but excuse me. But when I was a kid, it was rough. And, there was like a bar on one side of my house and like a hippie commune on the other. Like once a month, the cops would raid the house next door, and the cops would be lined up and lights on the street and people screaming and yelling. My dad got held up at gunpoint on our front steps. I was huddled in the car with a friend of mine who happened to be black. We were like peering out the window. I had like white trash living around the corner, you know, Latino kids living, you know, a couple houses down, Cuban immigrants, their whole building got demolished because it wasn't safe to live in, you know, and, you know, black, white, Jews, everybody. And it was pretty integrated. So a mile away were the rich kids living by the lake. So I had all those worlds in one, and we walked to school and the whole deal. So I didn't tend to look at a person's color as inherently threatening to me. I kind of learned to look at a person, whether they'd be inherently threatening. So maybe it is partly what you're used to, but before you judge everybody for an unconscious bias, maybe just be aware we all have them. Black people have them too. White people have them, black people have them, brown people have them, Asian people have them. It's okay that we have them. If we talked about them, acknowledged them, didn't cancel everyone for having them, maybe we'd get a little farther. And then focus on the people who really have what, you know, Monkey Arms is pointing out, the actual focused like hatred. An unconscious bias and an epithet, you know, the difference is, right, you have a bias versus you verbalizing it into an, and again, if you're thinking it in your head and not saying it, to me, it's not that much different, right? You're thinking a bad epithet about someone but not saying it, well, okay, you know, how's that so much different? You just didn't verbalize it, it's still going on in your head, you know? Better you don't verbalize it, but I'm saying either way, you know? And we all share a certain level of bias. And that's just being human. It's getting through it and finding the common ground and looking past it and not getting so stuck in the divide that I think is what's important. Let me talk. And by the way, thank you guys for all your comments. I love it on New Year's Day. We're having a dialogue. Let me back this up to where I wanted to go, because I think this is interesting. I said The Bachelor would explain America. So for those of you not Bachelor fans, I give you the quick season 24 of The Bachelor. And if you're a Bachelor fan, you probably know more than I do. Pilot Pete. Do you at least know who Pilot Pete is? Pilot Pete is the pilot who was in The Bachelorette, and then he became The Bachelor in season 24. 24 seasons of The Bachelor. It's something, right? 24 seasons. So Pilot Pete wins The Bachelor. And sidebar about The Bachelor. I was considered as one of the hosts of The Bachelor. When it first came out, they were a handful of people they were thinking about, and I was one of them that they were thinking about hosting The Bachelor. I never could have done it. I never could have done what Chris does. But nonetheless, he was perfect for it. But, you know, if you think when I was younger, I kind of had, and my, you know, TV queue was great with men and with women. You know, I was straight, he's gay, and he works better for it in all respects. But I was actually, you know, one of the people they thought about. So think if I'd been the host of The Bachelor for 24 years. I mean, who could have even known it would last 24 years? But anyway, Peter Weber becomes The Bachelor. And as he's coming down to the wire, he picks a woman and he gets, you know, it's Hannah Enslus, and he gets engaged to her, the end of the season finale. And then a month later, he breaks it off because he still has feelings for Madison Pruitt, who's like the runner-up finalist in The Bachelor. So he dumps first one, goes for the second one. You know, Monkey Arms, you distract me from my thing, but I actually like Times Square, so I don't know. I have a thing. I lived for 3 months in Times Square, literally in that Marriott hotel for 3 months. It was trippy. It was like a whole world from a world of another world. So I happen to like Times Square. I love New York. I love the gritty. I love the way it all just kind of crunches in on itself. The mass of humanity, the smells, the sights, it's just something. I don't know if I've lived there before. I could live there again. I don't know. But New York's changing also. Back to The Bachelor. So then he dumps number one for number two. And then a few months later decides that actually he's going to go for Kelly Flanagan, who's like number 5 in the Bachelor lineup of women in the show. So he's now with her. She's the true love. And he says, this is my true love. And then just like last week, he announces that their relationship is over as well. So what's the point? Well, a couple things. And why does this explain a lot about America? So millions of people watch The Bachelor. Millions. And, you know, before you throw them all under the bus, they're not all, some of them may be like simple-minded people. There's simple-minded people everywhere. But lots of intelligent, smart, educated, thoughtful, political, left and right people like reality shows like The Bachelor. And The Bachelor has survived for 4 seasons on a simple premise. You're going to get with a bunch of people. You're going to pick one, fall in love forever. It's like happily ever after. But it never really works, right? I mean, the number of times someone has succeeded at finding love in The Bachelor is rare. Now, most people go, well, duh, it's a show. Yes and no. Shows work because there's a conceit that people fall for, even if somewhere deep down they know it isn't true. It's not that everybody thinks The Bachelor is just fake. And it's not that The Bachelor is just fake. Sometimes there's a fakeness to it. Sometimes somebody truly is just playing to get the part to be famous for a minute, whether they're the bachelorettes in The Bachelor and the Bachelor himself, or the bachelorette in The Bachelorette, and the Bachelor is lining up for that. Sometimes it's people just trying to get a gig and get famous. But trust me, if you've ever talked to any of them, sometimes it's not. Often they really do think. I've known people who have been contestants on the shows. And they're not always, some part of them believed it might be them. There's a conceit that millions of people buy into. Oh God, our politics are like the show, The Bachelor. I don't know what that means. But yeah, I'm going with The Bachelor to help make sense of politics.
He says the Batch Elder.
Oh, the Batch Elder? Who's that? Me?
No, that's Monkey Arms. That's what he was saying.
Oh, I don't get it. I'm slow. I don't get jokes.
He was just trying to match, bachelor with an old person and elder, so he was trying to combine the words.
Batch Elder. Okay. All right. So here's the thing, though. Think about this. The conceit that you can fall in love and it lasts forever. That's why people watch the show, even though a part of them knows that it's produced. And again, as I said, it's not 100% produced. There's a certain element of people are willing on the show to believe it could be them. And there's a certain part of a certain percentage of those contestants who actually think it will be them and think they will find true love this way and kind of go, why not? You can find it any number of ways. They're giving me a group of people who I might be right for. I'll find one. It's like old days when people lived in small communities and didn't travel a lot. You had X number of people in your community. You fell in love with someone, got married, lasted forever. You hadn't met the rest of the world. We meet a lot more people now. Bachelor's like a small condensation of that. But it doesn't work if everybody just goes, it's BS, it's made up. At a certain level, people believe it. They believe the possibility that this can happen. And they believe it season after season after season. When it fails season after season after season to last. Because again, the number of Bachelor and Bachelorette couples that have actually made it beyond like a couple months is tiny. There's a few. Most of them come apart, which doesn't mean they were all fake to start with. Pilot Pete, I don't think, is all fake to start with. I think he's truly falling in love with each of these people and torn up by it. And this is where a lot about America comes into focus. We're a people who have always been willing to believe in something sort of a little out of our reach and a little bit fanciful. I mean, even in a whole, look at marriage, right? I mean, people believe in marriage. When you're getting married, you believe it's, going to be forever. You don't go, well, wait, look at the stats. The stats are that half of all marriages end in divorce. So realistically, I got a 50% shot of this lasting. Who gets married thinking that? I mean, a tiny percentage would get married thinking that. It's probably going to end. You get married going, it's going to be forever. Then 500 people get married tomorrow. This is going to be forever. 250 of them, it isn't. Oh, you don't have to look very hard to see that it's not going to be forever for 250. It's not going to be forever for half of them. You're one of 50. I mean, imagine if your odds of surviving COVID were 50%. Everyone would be locked down no matter what their politics. No, 50% odds aren't great. But yet you get married thinking it's your 50%. You don't think of it that way. You're the 100%. What power we have to look past the stats, the numbers, and go, no, I'm going to say, why don't we go and get married for 5 years? I can do 5. We'll renew after 5 and see if it's working still because the rates are really bad. No, everybody goes, I'm getting married forever. It's me. Ours is going to last. A month later, it's done. A year later, it's done. 5 years later, it's done. A few last forever. Good for them. I'm not judging people either way. I'm just saying our willingness to believe in something that doesn't actually make a lot of sense and to buy into it. That sort of defines America, and our willingness to look past what's sort of right in our face to believe that premise. Sure, the cynics will look at Pilot Pete and be like, whatever. But lots of people are worked up about Pilot Pete, following Pilot Pete, and Pilot Pete's letter to, to Kelly Flanagan, sort of on Instagram. Of course, you post your breakup when you're the Bachelor on Instagram. Was this heartfelt thing about how love takes us to the highest places and the lowest places, and he's forever grateful to her for what she brought into his life and what she taught him about life and about love. And thank you, Kelly. You will also. I mean, it's pretty sincere. You read it, you can't think the guy's making it up. Like, he's believing it. He was grateful for this, and probably grateful for the other two too. 3 women in less than a year. Each one was the one. Still moving on. And yet we don't go, well, duh, dude, maybe you should just be single for the rest of your life. You go, okay, well, maybe number 4 will work. It's not, third time wasn't a charm. That's a lot about America, guys. It's a lot about how America is. If you realize that lens, you can understand a lot about politics, a lot about why we do what we do, and a lot about why we think what we think. You want to understand Donald Trump and Donald Trump's appeal to millions and millions of people, and you're not a Trump supporter? Think about The Bachelor. It's not just the ability to con people. Yeah, America is an idealistic at its core. And I'm not saying we shouldn't be monkey arms. I'm not saying we're wrong to be idealistic. But I'll come back to the idealism part. I'm going to the how we perceive and value things part. And if you look at Trump, those of you who hate Trump see a con man who conned everybody. Well, you could just as easily say Pilot Pete is a con man who conned everybody, that The Bachelor is a con that cons everybody. But people aren't just conned. They're aware at some level of the con, and they're okay with it. That's my point with The Bachelor. It's not like everybody thinks it's 100% real, and everybody knows that it never seems to work, just as they do with marriage. But people want to believe in what it's offering. People wanted to believe in what Trump was offering. They wanted to believe in what he said. They wanted to believe in some of what he said he did do. If you dislike him or not, he said, I won't be like the rest. I won't be censored. I'll take everybody on. Now, I don't for a second think Trump cared more about the American people than he did himself. Self-serving. I think most politicians are, but he's truly self-serving. But it doesn't mean what he said wasn't true at some level. And people could see who he was and still buy into that. Often these things are somewhat simplistic. I'm not a simplistic person in my head, but I get that simple ideas often translate and work. And we're willing to believe them. We're willing to take a leap of faith for a simple idea, even when it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Thus, a lot of Donald Trump. And thus, a lot of what's happening right now with Joe Biden coming into office. We're all the same in this way. We're willing to believe something. Look, we've always bought big ideas. Kennedy, again, Kennedy, to strip away Kennedy, Kennedy was not a great human being by any means, on whatever standard you want. Character, personal life, lied like crazy to everyone, from his family to the world, hardly transparent, a bit of a racist. A racist, not as extreme as, say, Lyndon Johnson, a total anti-communist freak, wanted us in Vietnam, basically started the trigger that got us into Vietnam, even though Johnson's the one who dragged us full on in, not a model of much, but he offered a simple vision. That's not what you can do for your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. A simple, charismatic vision that people fell for. And Camelot was born. And 60, 70, how many years later is it? 60 years later? Camelot's still in people's heads as an ideal. Yes and no. I'm not just defining a person who preys on people who want to be lied to. Again, I'm asking you to put your pejorative about Trump aside and just look at it analytically. Because that's what all politicians do at some level. I could argue Kennedy preyed on people who wanted to be lied to. I could argue Roosevelt preyed on people who wanted to be lied to. I could argue Lincoln preyed on people who wanted to be lied to. We know less about the guys back then, except from their writings, but certainly in the modern era. I mean, at some level, I could argue every preacher, pastor, even the Pope, preys on people who want to be lied to. I mean, anything where you ask people to believe something that you really can't prove is kind of asking them to do that. And the Pope doesn't get a free pass on this. I mean, I got nothing against the Pope, but, the Pope thinks he's the direct link from God. I mean, come on. You get to be the one direct link from God, you and your church? Millions and millions, hundreds of millions of people believe that. So arguing it, again, I'm merely saying Americans as a whole will go for something that we will forgive and forgive and forgive. And this is actually Trump's Achilles heel. Trump had no ability to be at all repentant, had no ability to Trump was simple in a certain way, but he was so narcissistic in another way. But the idea of Bachelor Pilot Pete, going through one person after another and why people aren't like, F you, it's sort of like, no, but he's trying. The guy's sincere. He's trying to find love. If you're trying to find a good goal, you can stumble your way through it. That's the pass Biden gets. I mean, I joke that he's a scarecrow and you guys just support him because, hey, he's not Trump. But the reality is Biden kind of does that, right? Why do people think Biden's so empathetic? Why do people think Biden's so caring? I mean, based on what? Not based on, I mean, if you pulled up a bunch of Biden quotes, go back to like Anita Hill. I mean, come on. Like, he trashed that when he threw her under the bus for calling out Clarence Thomas. Like, he the original, woman slamming to, keep her down. Do not speak, woman. I mean, come on. Well, there's countless examples here. I don't see but he projects this guy who's, older and cares about America and wants the best for us. And people buy the vision, gaffes and all. And I get why. It's what I don't trust about any politicians. Kind of what I liked about Bernie. Bernie kind of was more unfiltered in that way. It's what I like about the politicians who are more just raw and real. But that said, okay, so if you buy my premise that what The Bachelor says a lot about America is our willingness to believe in an ideal, big or small, no matter what the facts, it's all how it's presented to us. And hasn't it always been that? Monkey Arm saying our country was founded on an ideal. Absolutely. And ideals can be good. I'm not saying we shouldn't have ideals. I'm the most idealistic person in the world. When I worked for Clinton in the White House, his top political advisor one day, we're driving to breakfast and he's like, Rob, how do you wake up every morning so idealistic? He's like, isn't it exhausting? I was like, no, I mean, it's what I believe. He's like, don't you get tired of being idealistic? Like, real world politics, guys, is not very idealistic. Whether you're the Bidens, the Trumps, the Bushes, the Clintons, whatever, Obamas, the camps around these people are not a bunch of wide-eyed idealists. There's a few idealists in there packed in with a lot of realists who are political sharks every day. There's not a lot of idealism in Washington. There's a lot of power politics. But people, we respond to idealism. We'll believe idealism to the 100th fold if you let us. Whether that's a Trump vision of America, whether that's Biden's, unity and dignity for all, we'll see how that plays out in politics, or whether that's The Bachelor. And where does that leave us? It leaves us in a unique spot because this is where most of our politicians don't get it. Crafty's texting me something. Video, Crafty, I'm interrupting. You texting me something you want me to do?
No. You're good. You're good.
Okay, go on with the show. God spoke and I can still talk. This is where I think it gets interesting because what I think is fascinating to me is how Bill de Blasio of New York City doesn't get that. So New York City, Times Square, empty, nobody there. But who's there dancing with his wife saying New York's the greatest city in the world is Mr. Out of Touch Mayor de Blasio. To which Meghan McCain of The View goes on Twitter and posts this. She says, waiting for Crafty. There it is. You've always been basically the worst political in modern history, but shutting down the NYC, but having your own private party in Times Square is really chef's kiss. The most tone-deaf thing I may have ever seen a mayor do. Everyone hates you, de Blasio. Okay, it's pretty funny. But again, what she's saying is, okay, we can take it down. What she's saying is, how tone deaf can you be? Now, at some level, de Blasio either thinks this makes sense or he doesn't care, right? This is the same thing I would argue about Trump, about Newsom, about Mayor, Chicago's Mayor Lightfoot, about most of the political elite and the celebrities. They either don't get it or they don't care. I don't know which it is. What part of de Blasio thinks I've shut the city down? I, for the first time in 113 years, said nobody comes to Times Square, but I'm going to go and dance. I'm going to go and dance because I'll show people how much fun New York City is. What most people see is, why do you get to go to Times Square and dance on TV? Like, F you. I'm there to stay home. That's how out of touch it is. Now, just to make everything link back, it's not just a right-wing, moderate right-winger like Meghan McCain saying it. Andy Cohen, who hosts the the Bravo after shows, right? And is sort of the, emperor of the Bachelor world, was on with Anderson Cooper when it happened. And Anderson Cooper takes a shot and chokes on it, gags on the shot as the mayor's dancing. I'm not saying Anderson Cooper had doing this because of the thing. He may have been doing it because of the shot or just to be funny. But Andy Cohen says, that's how I felt when Mayor de Blasio dancing just now. He's like, I don't need to see that at the beginning of 2021. And he puts his hands up in the air and he gets actually angry. And I mean, like visibly angry, and says, honestly, he's like, do something with this city. Honestly, get it together. So this wasn't a right or left thing, right? Andy Cohen is so far not in the right. I don't know if you know who he is, but if you watch any of the reality show stuff, he's the guy, right? I mean, just watch him. He is so not in the right camp. He's like, do something with this city. Honestly, get it together. It just rubbed everyone the wrong way. It was like, what the F are you doing? Why are you out dancing in the Times Square when you shut it down? Which part don't you get? That's offensive to everybody who can't be part of it. That's the opposite of The Bachelor. That's what nobody can relate to. And this is where the elites in power on both sides let us all down. Because I don't care which side of the political spectrum you guys are on. They are not like you. They do not think like you. They do not think for you first. They think for themselves first. They do what is in their own best interest first. You come second. Why? Why to this day do so many of you still trust what the government tells you whenever they tell you? I mean, both sides. The right always kind of trusted the government a little bit. Now the right's more distrustful, but the left has become super trustful. You guys were always the we don't trust the government for good reason. Why do you think they tell you the truth? Like, what part of history is showing you the governments tend to tell you the truth? I mean, where do you start, with the lies, with what they've covered up over time, with what we don't even know they've covered up over time? I don't care whether it's the little things like, covering up like Franklin Roosevelt, couldn't walk, wanted to show that he was strong. So you never saw that he couldn't really walk, that he was in a wheelchair. I mean, they managed to keep that hidden, that maybe it's a small thing, but the bigger things they hid, what's the real motive for dropping a nuclear bomb? Sure, it was to end the war, but it was also a power play with Russia. How many things have they not told you about? I don't care whether it's the Kennedy killing and a conspiracy like that, whether it's what happened in Iran-Contra, whether, it's every single administration has hidden, covered up. Heck, Edward Snowden is my favorite example. I'm on him lately about this. He revealed that our government was actively spying on us, breaking American law on millions of American citizens. The law said you can't do it. The NSA, the Department of Defense, were actively doing it. Like I said, he got chased out of the country, called a traitor. Everyone on both sides said he should get prosecuted. Why? Prosecuted for pointing out that our government once again lied to us? Like, it can be the little things. I make fun of aliens, UFOs, but I mean, they lied about that. They know there's unidentified flying objects. Now they're finally admitting it. They always admit things like 50, 60 years later. They lie about so much, and yet we continue to believe them, even with COVID. I mean, I'm not picking on Dr. Fauci, but think of how he keeps changing things. I mean, at what point do you go, he even admits he's doing it? I mean, first masks, we didn't need masks. then we needed masks. Now, people say, well, he said that because we didn't have enough masks. Okay, so we needed masks and we should wear them, but we didn't have enough. That's the argument they made after the fact. No, he really thought you needed masks. He just said we didn't because they didn't think there'd be enough for essential workers. Fair enough. It's a lie. It's a lie. You lied because you felt you didn't have enough masks for those who needed it most, so you told everyone else they didn't need them. That's the official reasoning on that, saying that. Or you actually thought people didn't need them and suddenly you thought they did. Much less plausible. And those who defend Fauci have said, no, he didn't think you didn't need them and suddenly thought you did. He knew you needed them. He just lied. What about the vaccine numbers? X number of people, was it 65% of the population needs to be vaccinated for herd immunity? And like last week, it went up to 80, 75 or 80. And he came out and said, look, I said the lower number to start with because I didn't think people would be comfortable with a higher number. But now that I think people are, I'm going to raise the number. So what you just said is I lied about how many people I thought needed to have a vaccination for herd immunity because I didn't think you'd accept if I told you the truth. But now that I think you're more acceptance, I'll tell you the truth. Okay. You can argue these are well-intentioned lies. My point is they're lies. And they're the lies that we catch. And around COVID, who knows how many things are lies or not lies? That's part of the problem with COVID right now. There's so much we don't know, and there's been so much misinformation and so much politicization and lies on both sides that at a certain level people do go, I don't know what to believe. I don't know if you're telling me the truth or not. Masks are essential, as is social distancing. Seems somewhat obvious, especially the social distancing. The most shut down state in America, the governor goes out to dinner with a bunch of people, some his family, his wife, some his friends, a dozen, 15 people from all different parts of his world in a restaurant tightly packed with not a mask in sight. Are masks and social distancing essential, or are they just desirable? They said essential. So essential, we're literally destroying the economy of the state of California. The Rose Bowl wasn't in California this year. I mean, along with everybody else leaving, from Hewlett-Packard to Tesla, to Oracle, to the record number of people, the Rose Bowl left. The Rose Bowl can't be anywhere but in Canada. It can only be in Pasadena, but it wasn't this year. It was in Texas, right? It was Texas or Arkansas. The Rose Bowl left California. It should have been called the Rose Bowl anymore. I mean, that's the whole point. It's the Rose Bowl. It's always been. It's not about who plays in the Rose Bowl. The Rose Bowl is the Rose Bowl. It's the place. It's the game in Pasadena. That's what the Rose Bowl is. Left California. My point is merely, if you're going to do this stuff, if you're going to shut an entire state down, if you're going to tell people all this stuff, and yet you don't honor it, you don't follow it, it makes people question the truth. There's a Chicago Teachers Union, Sarah Chambers, I think is her name. She's a vice president in the Chicago Teachers Union. Like last week, put out a post saying, I'm going to be part of a education revolution. I've just signed the pledge for my right to work in a safe environment. I'm signing the pledge along with thousands of others to continue to be able to work safely remotely from home. 5 days later, there's pictures of her on Instagram in the Caribbean at a pool. And her response is, you know what? Flying is the safest thing. My doctor said flying is safer than a grocery store because the filtration, is ICU level and everyone's wearing a mask. Okay, first of all, that may be true. I've argued for a while. Everybody thinks flying's so terrible. I'm like, planes filter like crazy. Everybody's wearing masks. It's actually not, if you flow and you realize it's not so unsafe, even though we all think it is. And she's like, I already had COVID, so I'm going to be fine. Okay, which part of that doesn't matter? You're saying you're going to fight for the right for you to work from home where you're safe, but you're fine to go to the Caribbean. And again, you're asking for thousands of other teachers in your city to do this, to deny kids who we now know, and the CDC's come out and said, Robert Relaford, the whole thing saying kids can go to school. They don't transmit it very easily. They don't contract it very easily, and they tend to be fine when they get it. It's safe, and it's unhealthy to keep them at home. So you unions are insisting you need for your safety to stay home, but you're going out to the Caribbean to vacation. Aside from the hypocrisy, which part of you get to go to the Caribbean to vacation and hundreds of thousands of kids in Chicago can't leave town to vacation? It's kids school is like a lifeline from the projects they live in. But you actually can afford to enjoy a Caribbean vacation while saying you're fighting for the right to stay home. I mean, it's the hypocrisy like that that makes people pissed. I don't care what your politics, it should make you angry. And why you trust your political leaders is just beyond me. I don't care which side you're on. Why you trust what the government tells you. When did we start believing them? I mean, back to the ideals. We believe in simple ideals. I believe in simple ideals. Hey, Crafty.
Rob.
You there?
Yep.
Want to join me for a second?
Sure.
I think all our viewers went silent. I must have scared them off today. We had a whole stream of people. Monkey arms.
They're all on YouTube right now, so yeah, they're still there.
Yeah, no, it's all good.
Yep.
I'm going to wrap the show in a second, Crafty, but I just want to say thank you to you for, putting this all together with me, making it a real kind of virtual adventure, We're on a mission. We are, Crafty. We're on a mission to try to have a different kind of dialogue that's interactive. And I know people joke I'm like Mr. Rogers, but whatever. I'm determined that we can bring people together and find some common ground. And at least, we don't survive if we don't. And Crafty's been part of that mission with me. And, Crafty's politics aren't the same as mine. He's probably a little more conservative than me, but he's balanced this same thing with me to try to find a way to bring people together.
It depends. I don't understand the concept of people just, aligning themselves left or aligning themselves just blindly right. It depends on the situation. Things are so nuanced. It doesn't make sense to me to normally align conservative or liberal. It's let me go ahead and understand the facts of each topic, of each issue, because everything is so complex and I think it's dangerous to honestly align yourself to either left or right. So to me, I've never understood that. And
very Spockian of you. And you do look like you're on Enterprise floating back and forth in space.
Thank you. It's just the blur effect over here and visiting my parents.
Okay. All right. Happy New Year's, Crafty. All right, I'm going to wrap it up.
You got it.
I used to criticize the hypocrisy in leadership until I became in a position of leadership, and then it makes more sense. Too much to put into comment. You know what, Monkey Arms, and I don't know what your leadership spot is, but I'm going to say this, and I've been in positions of leadership too, and I've known a lot of people in positions of leadership, I think I've told this story briefly before, but once when I was sitting inside the White House with President Clinton, he got really upset at something I said about him not doing something. And he pointed his finger on my face and he's like, you know what, Rob? He's like, he get all red. And he's like, fingers right up in my face. He's like, people always say, because you're president, you can do whatever you want. It's just not that simple. And I thought about it. I've thought about that for a long time. I've used that as a point to sort of say, don't worry, when Trump says he's going to do everything, he can't do it. But I think the other side of that is that I don't think it's simple being in a position of leadership. I don't mean to dismiss them inherently as bad human beings. They're not all bad human beings. Some of them are. I don't think it's a simple thing to be a leader. I think you have to make very difficult choices. I don't care. Go back in time. I mentioned the atomic bomb. Harry Truman having to decide whether to drop that bomb, it's got to be one of the hardest decisions, the hardest decision he ever made in his life. Do I drop a bomb on 2 cities of civilians to shorten a war and to send a message to our arch enemy rising in Russia, who's been our ally, that don't mess with us? Well, a horribly hard decision to make. This is one of so many. Every president, every leader has had to come to a point where they have to make really tough decisions. And you can't tell everybody everything because look at how people look at The Bachelor. People kind of want to be spoon-fed things. That said, Monkey Arms, I do think that it's okay to call out the hypocrisy of leadership. Just because it's difficult, just because it's not easy, you don't get a free pass to just do it when you want. If you're making really tough decisions, and you can come out and say, this is really tough. And maybe it's after the fact and you say, this was really tough. Or we had to weigh a lot before we could come forward with this. I get that. I actually do have both compassion, respect, and understanding. It's tough to be a leader. It's not easy. But the hypocrisy I'm calling out, Monkey Arms, is pseudo leadership. So Gavin Newsom doesn't get that pass from me because he's had plenty of chances to step up and show leadership. And when he went to that restaurant, you can say I'm picking on one thing. It doesn't get more worse than that. You've destroyed your state's economy. Maybe you felt you had to. Fine. Don't you dare go to a fancy $1,000 a couple restaurant and flaunt it, thinking no one will see it. Flaunt that you're violating every effing regulation you said was essential to the survival of the people of your state. So they had to suck it up and lose everything while you get to keep everything, while your winery's fine, while your kids are going to private schools, not even vaccinated, and you're going to fancy restaurants. When you do that, monkey arms, you don't get a pass. You don't get a freebie. And you can argue. You could make the same case with certain things Trump's done. I'm fine with that. I'm not the guy saying Trump was some great leader. I think he had some good policies. Certain things I liked. Like I said, I liked that he came in and shook things up. He had so many flaws. He had so little ability to unite in the simplest ways, to make everything about himself, to put himself in front of everything, that I think with this whole election thing, I think he knows he lost. I think he knew he lost a long time ago. And he continues this ruse. And millions of people believe him, just like they believe The Bachelor, when he knows full well he didn't win. And he knows, well, there was fraud. It's not the reason. Just as hypocritical. You don't get a pass on that kind of hypocrisy. Yeah, I get it, monkey arms, and I appreciate that and respect it. But what I'm saying is sometimes it's the simple that defines the big. And when you're willing to look past the small act, yes, well, that's a whole nother one. Newsom didn't date her. He was married to her. It's his ex-wife. She was the first lady of San Francisco. Yeah, Kimberly Guilfoyle, who's now with the Trump Jr. or Trump, no, yeah, Donald Trump Jr., of Fox News, was Governor Newsom's wife when he was mayor of San Francisco. And de Blasio is a huge mess. And Cruzen's a New Yorker and speaks to New York. And Cruzen is a hardcore liberal union guy with a lot of integrity. And our views are very different, often very different. In fact, we probably agree on a tiny number of things politically, but a lot of things in the bigger picture. And to me, it's a show of how you can have really different views and still find common ground based on principles. And I'd argue someone like Cruzen and I have a lot of the same principles, even though sometimes we come to different conclusions with those principles. And back to end on the point about leadership, I don't think that big decisions are often easy to make and can't be nuanced, but I think sometimes the small actions speak really loudly. And in a time like this, when you're asking people to do this and you're unwilling to yield at all, you're not willing to look at anything that suggests maybe you've made mistakes, maybe it's not working, maybe you've done the wrong thing. You just keep doubling down. You close outdoor dining in restaurants when there's no evidence it doesn't work. Yet people can still fly on airplanes lined up. You know, I was on a plane, there's like 12 people in a space like 6 feet wide. Like, you know, that's okay, you know. Right, you can have outdoor dining if you're a movie set or a TV show. You know, when there's all the loopholes and you can go to Kmart and you're not willing to compromise on any of that and you go violate the rules, that shows something. And I'm picking on Newsom maybe because it's in the state that I was a resident of and it bugs me the most. But it's across the board, and it's both parties. It's Mitch McConnell not giving up the $2,000 stimulus checks and saying it's about something else and saying it's about Section 230 and election integrity. I mean, BS, whatever. And I don't care if you don't think it's fiscally sound to do it. Just do it because it's the right thing to do for Americans right now. Yeah, we could have done it better. Yeah, we could have done it more focused. Yeah, we could have decided who really needs the $2,000 and who doesn't and give $4,000 to the people who need it. But we didn't do that. So give it because enough people need it. You're going to benefit more than are just going to get a freebie out of it. It's the right thing to do. When these guys and women don't do the right thing, they don't get a pass in my book. And let's end it on that. Cruzen can always convince me when I'm wrong. And you know what? I try to acknowledge when I'm wrong, and I'm pretty stubborn. But on that note, Happy New Year. Let's all convince each other when they're wrong. And yes, acting with integrity is key. I try to, we all try to, and we all fail, and we all will fail. I'm not expecting us to be perfect. Thus, Pilot Pete, 3 times marriage failing. I actually believe Pilot Pete thinks he's trying, And you know what? Maybe part of integrity is just making an honest effort, but an actual honest effort. Thanks for watching. Happy New Year, you guys. Thanks for being part of it. Follow, share, and continue the conversation with me. See you later.